You're at NASA. Do you have any fun NASA stories for us?
Do we have any fun ones? Not really. It was a lot of sitting in conference rooms and arguing about contract requirements.
Weren't you, I seem to recall, like, didn't you have something to do with things going to Mars?
Oh, yeah. So, the longest standing project that I was on, so I was on a couple of deep space related things, but the project I was on was essentially the program that builds the nuclear power systems that go on deep space missions. So any sort of, whether it's like a probe or a satellite or a rover, whatever it is, all those things up in space need electricity. So for things that are typically going to like the moon or something that's kind of close in, they basically put big solar panels on them. So like some of the rovers on the moon, have solar panels. For things that are going to places that don't have light, you got to find a different way to power them, right? So one of the things that they do is they actually build nuclear powered power systems. Some of the, more well-known ones are things that are like on deep space orbiters going to the surface of Jupiter and stuff like that, where there's no light. In this case,
because of the distance or because Jupiter's atmosphere blocks it? Or both?
Either.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on either. So like if you're sending a probe like the Viking probe, like way out there, by the time you get past like Jupiter or whatever, you need like square miles of solar panels to collect enough energy, right? So they put these little nuclear things on there. Basically, it's a box that has, it's not stuff you would use in like nuclear weapons, but it's a byproduct of when they used to make them. So it's a different isotope. It's called plutonium-238. And it just basically sits there and gets hot for eternity. It's got like a really long half-life. And they use essentially these little power cells that go on there that convert the heat into electricity. And then they package that into this big box and they just put that on whatever the piece of equipment is. And then the electricity from that charges batteries. And then they use the batteries to power whatever they do. So for like the rover that we have, it can go to like dark spots on Mars. It's called the Curiosity rover. And it might have enough power to maybe move for, I'm just making this up, I don't know the real number, 20 minutes a day, right? So it charges the batteries for 24 hours. Then it's able to do work
from the nuclear plant or from the solar panels?
From the nuclear thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you looked at a picture of the rover, you see this little like box that comes out the back.
Okay.
With some fins on it. And that's what that is.
So, hey, so sorry I interrupted you. You're saying even with the nuclear power, it charges the battery that then runs dry in 20 minutes, and then it's got to take a whole daily cycle again to recharge, even using the plutonium?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
I think I'm going to get my numbers like slightly wrong, but I think the thing might have been like 200 watts or something like that.
Okay. All right. So
it's not a lot.
It's not a suitcase nuke, the way people think of that term.
No. Okay. No, not at all.
Okay. And then is that something you had studied, or is that like something anybody who went through a first year PhD physics program would know how to get their hands dirty and work on that?
Yeah. So the interesting thing was when I was actually working on the project, we did not know what the actual mission was going to be. So this was back in like, call it 2010 or something like that. Probably even earlier than that, 2008, whatever it was. And they knew, and they were going through proposals for potential missions. So one of the missions was just called Mars 2020. Another one was going to be a lander that went on to Europa, a moon of Jupiter. So there were all these different things. Each of them had a need for nuclear power. So we were working on the power system, right? The big box that sits on the back of whatever it is. But we had to make sure that this power system would work with any of the missions that we were doing. Right. So essentially what I was doing was making sure that Lockheed Martin was building the nuclear power system. And we had to make sure that the requirements for that thing encompassed any of the missions it could possibly go on. So we had to make sure that the electromagnetic frequencies wouldn't interfere with the communication systems that are already on Mars. We had to make sure it could survive the chemical environment on Jupiter, like all these different things. So essentially, what my piece was sort of managing all of those requirements from all the different missions and making sure that whatever Lockheed built met all of those different specs.
Okay,
So I would say it's really not anything you would study in any sort of
right.
physics or engineering program, but having sort of like that broad knowledge to understand at least all of the different specifics is something. So it was more of like something where you had to be very broad and have a lot of knowledge in a bunch of different things.
Okay, so out of curiosity, was there, no pun intended, was there somebody at Lockheed doing the exact same thing and you were just double checking, or was it like it was your job or your teams to come up with the specs and that they were just going to robotically build it, and if it didn't, or were they also working on it to say, whoa, actually, shouldn't we take into account such and such, because if they go to Jupiter, this will happen? And you guys going back and forth?
So yeah, the way we did it was, I would work with the teams, and it was more than just me. I mean, there were like multiple people here, but we would work with the teams that were sort of designing these different missions and sort of dragging all the requirements out of them, the specific stuff. And then what Lockheed would do is they would put together a design and set up different tests and verification things to prove that they're meeting each of these requirements. So it was more so like we were putting together the architectural drawing and they had to make like the actual detailed blueprint.
Okay.
To make sure that it met the original vision.
But I guess my question was, they were just assuming you guys knew what you wanted, that they weren't double checking and coming back to you and saying, we were thinking about it, and wouldn't you rather have us build something that went blah, blah, blah? Okay.
Nope.
Okay. One other one here, and this isn't a gotcha. Was there something where one of the rovers fell into a ditch because they got the units of measurement wrong, or am I getting mixed up with something?
It was, yeah. So that was actually, it was a landing thing, I believe. So I think they were sending it down on a parachute. I can't remember if it was on the moon or on Mars, but yeah, they essentially,
well, if it was a parachute, they wouldn't work on the moon, right?
It could. It would just, get less atmosphere. But they also had like this airbag thing. It was like a giant airbag that would like bounce and then it would open up and the thing would come out. But yeah, it was like they used feet instead of meters or something like that. And instead of the thing opening up, it just like crashed into the surface. I can't remember the details, but something along those lines definitely happened.
Okay. I hope that was not your project.
That was not. No.
Okay, good. Okay, so the last question I have about this is, at what point did they tell you about how they faked the moon landing? Was that like day 7 of the job, or they wait later?
I'd have to kill you, Bob.
Okay, good answer.